These ones were planted together on the 29th of April, together with the Ökumenisches Gymnasium zu Bremen. This one grew under LED light, and this one grew under a sunny part of the hab. As you can see, clearly this one received less light as this one. This one is becoming nice and huge, ready to be eaten. Then these ones, I started them on the 5th of May with Schule am Wallering, Gymnasium Wegesack, and KSC Gymnasium in Bremen. This one was grown under LED light, this one was grown in a sunny part of the habitat, and this one was left next to our window, which, as you can tell, is not really the sunniest part of the hab. Clearly this one didn't get enough light, this one not enough either, and this one is almost ready to be eaten and has grown very well under the LED light. I started this one on the 13th of May with the French school, and this one was grown under LED light, this one was grown under a sunny part of the habitat, and this one was grown next to our window. And again, this one is growing much better than the two others. As you can see, the growth of your lettuce is really dependent on light conditions and where you place them. I'm sure you've noticed this on the plants you're growing yourself, and I can see it in the pictures you are sending to me. The main reason is that to grow seaweed we would need a lot of water compared to lettuce because they grow in water. The other reason is that seaweed is not very common in European and Western cuisine, so people are not very used to eating it. That's why lettuce is preferred, because lettuce, we are sure it grows really fast. It's quite easy to grow, you don't need that much water, and everybody is going to eat it. Seaweed, it's a little bit different in terms of taste and in terms of cooking. There has been some studies for space flies to grow algae because they're full of protein and they grow also really fast. This is a really good question, because when astronauts spend 6 months on the International Space Station, when they come back to Earth, they can barely walk. So you can imagine that astronauts spending 6 to 8 months in a spaceship to reach Mars would have difficulties walking when exiting the ship. So why wouldn't we use artificial gravity to go to Mars? That's a really good point. As it is a bit complicated in terms of technology to make. This is why. In order to create an artificial gravity, you rotate your spacecraft. The smaller your spacecraft, the faster you have to rotate it. But if you rotate it too fast, then people would feel different gravity levels between their head and their feet. So you need a bigger spacecraft so that you can rotate it slower. If we want to have a spacecraft rotating at a decent speed for humans, and to have Earth gravity in the spacecraft, it would need to have a radius of 220 meters. That's huge. For example, if you decide, okay, maybe they don't need Earth gravity, they could do the travel with just Mars gravity, which is 0.4 gravity of the Earth, you would still need a radius of 90 meters in order to rotate your spacecraft at a speed which would be survivable for humans. So the conclusion is, in order to create artificial gravity, we need really huge spacecraft. There are other solutions which exist. For example, you could have a normal size spacecraft linked via tether to a counterweight, and they would rotate like this and create artificial gravity in the spacecraft. The problem with that is that the tether would also have to be very long. As I said before, you need a radius of 200 meters in a spaceship, so you would need to have a tether 400 meters long in order to have the desired artificial gravity in your craft. So in order to create artificial gravity, you need big spacecrafts or big tethers, and these involves also cost and feasibility issues, which we're not capable of right now. So perhaps in the first missions to Mars, we won't have artificial gravity in the spacecraft. But scientists are always working on countermeasures to prevent effects of microgravity on human body. So probably astronauts going to Mars would be doing a lot of sport in order to maintain their bone mass and muscle mass.
What would I do with a corpse of a crew member on Mars? So currently, as it stands with the planetary protection measures, you wouldn't be able to leave anything biologic back on the surface of Mars. So you would have to figure out a way to bring that body back with you. You might burn the body so that it was just ashes, so that it would be more light and easier to compact, or you might leave the body as it is. At this point, I imagine it would be most dependent on the family and friends' wishes back home.
My answer doesn't change much for that. I think I would continue reading, working on papers, probably watch a lot of films I would normally get to watch.
Diff? Yeah, pretty much the same. Oh, hide and seek. Definitely hide and seek.
Russ?
I think that the journey to Mars is going to present itself with a lot of opportunities to do new and interesting science. So irrespective of what we do in our leisure time, we'll probably have as many scientific experiments to run as we would on the surface of Mars, whether it was looking at solar radiation, solar wind, magnetic fields, that kind of a thing. There's going to be lots of work to do even on the way to Mars.
Annie?
Yep, I agree. I think there'd be a lot of cool science, and for downtime, just keeping up with reading and things like that.
Fitness too.
Yeah, fitness important on the journey to Mars, because the journey from Earth to Mars will be in microgravity, so we'll have to exercise a lot per day in order not to arrive totally melted on the surface of Mars. We'll have a lot of science and a lot of maintenance in the ship to do, and for leisure, probably, as my crewmate said, lots of reading, probably some videos with the family, and yeah, some social activities too.
That's a good question. So because we have a communication delay, and we are very far from any medical services, we do have an on-call physician. So if it's an in-simulation, like if somebody gets a cold or a minor injury, then we would email our physician, and within 40 minutes we would have a response on what to do for care. If it was a severe injury, obviously we would break simulation and we would use the phone to either call emergency services or call our doctor directly. But we haven't had to do that too many times. As you can see here at the high seas, we're pretty well supplied. We are equipped to deal with any minor injuries or emergency situations. Over here we have our box from the World Clinic, and they provided us with a really good sample box of supplies and different medications that we can use. They also provided an instruction book that explains what to do under different circumstances, and also tells us when it's time to call a doctor and break simulation. We have an AED, which is always important to have on hand, splinting material, bandaging material. We have anything to treat any musculoskeletal injuries, as well as being fairly well stocked with medications. We can handle anything from colds, just generic pain, digestive issues. And they also equipped us with a longboard scoop stretcher, so that in case we have to go out into the field to get anybody who may have injured themselves, it's a lot easier for us to maneuver them and get them ready for emergency care. Care-wise, it's a little bit different here. Due to the 20-minute communication delay, you can't really have a telemedicine operation. So instead we do remote medicine, where we contact the doctor via email. We'll send him videos if there's something that we're particularly concerned about, and he'll video chat us back 20 minutes later. Okay, so containing the spread of a disease basically has to do with making sure that areas are clean. If somebody is sick, you take extra precautions to make sure everything gets wiped down with bleach, and that crew member, for the most part, keeps their distance from the rest of the crew. Since we're in such a small confined area, it's very, very important that we follow contamination measures, but it's also extremely difficult. We're not going to completely quarantine a crew member unless they have something that could be potentially deadly.
Casey, would you like to start?
I've been able to read a number of books in my free time here.
Annie?
Yep, I also read before bed each night.
It feels like to me we manage our free time more than we manage our work time. So if we want to do something with the rest of the crew, we end up having to schedule it.
Yeah, any really big, fun leisure events end up having to be scheduled into basically everyday life.
Yeah, I agree with the rest of the crew. We have to make time to have leisure time. Otherwise, we just get caught up with work and only do that. Well, if someone has a panic attack or gets crazy or even aggressive in the habitat, we don't have written procedures for that, but we would use our common sense, which is calm down the person, put away any tool which would be dangerous for that person or for the others, and yeah, calm down the person. If the person cannot be brought back to reason in a reasonable time, then we would contact the emergency services, which would take over the situation for us. So it's a simulation, so we deal with the problems first. If the medical emergency becomes bigger, we call it emergency personnel, as we would do on Earth.
Hello, there was a question about how we regulate the temperature inside the habitat. And what I'm going to show you is some of the systems that we use to do just that. So if you look over my shoulder here, this is actually one of the control panels that we have in the habitat. And each of these units up here is collecting data from around the habitat. The data that it collects is displayed on a website that we call Uwila, which is the Hawaiian word for energy. And if you look very closely, you can see the temperature outside of the habitat in 2 places and inside of the habitat in 3 places. And what the system does is it takes those temperatures and it calculates whether it should run the heater with the fan without the heater on, and the upstairs fan. And if you look closely on the display here, you can actually see that we have the fan state at the moment it's off. And if I click on it, it will tell me the last time it ran, turned on, what the temperature was, and how long it ran for. So over the last entire day, we've gone between 75 degrees Fahrenheit all the way down to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and currently we're sitting at 73.4 degrees Fahrenheit. When that temperature reaches 76 degrees Fahrenheit, the fan will turn back on and draw cool air from the bottom of the habitat and push the hot air out the top, resulting in a nice, comfortable living space. Thank you for your question.
As far as the experiments go, I think everything's going fine. If we're asking about our personal well-being, I actually think that the crew is doing very well.
Jeff?
Yeah, same sentiment. The psych studies seem to be progressing pretty well. We won't know the actual results of that till the end of all 3 missions, and we all seem to be fairly happy and healthy.
Rose?
Yeah, I mean, we're already, how many days are we in now?
76.
76 days into the mission, well past the halfway point, and I'm actually surprised at how good I feel and how happy I am psychologically.
Annie?
Same here. I feel good. I think I'm actually looking forward to stressors if they add any to the mission, and I feel good. So doing well.
Yeah, my answer is the same as the rest of the crew again. Feel really good. I thought I would not handle isolation that well, probably because of everybody stressing me out before. But in the end, yeah, it's just a routine, and I'm gonna cut this part.